Today I'm joined by Tulip. I'm not sure if you want to go by Tulip or if you want to go by your real name, but Tulip is a detransitioner in the UK. And why don't you tell us about yourself?
Sure. I'm quite happy to use my name, which is Richie. Um, I'm 35 years old. I medically transitioned when I was 26. Um, I'm still in that long process of trying to find out what the best solution is long term medically. I don't believe detransition is as cut and dry as just changing your hormones and getting more surgery. I don't believe any of that. What I think detransition is a disengagement from the mindset. So for me, I disengaged rather than detransitioned about, I don't know, I would say about 8 or 9 months ago is when I'd really was like, I'm done with this. I socially changed my name and kind of told everyone I was detransitioning in March, April this year. So it may seem relatively fresh, but it's not something that I've just went, ooh, I'm gonna go and detransition now because I'm sick of this shit. This has been like a long time coming. I feel like lockdown had a big part to deal with it, and I think that might have been because I was kind of removed away from everyone, and at this point, I'd nuked me social media and all that sort of thing. I didn't have much of an active presence anyway. It was like the occasional cat post, but nothing significant. Unfortunately, there's people trying the best to troll through the internet history to see what they can find of me, and there's just like nothing in the shit that there is. It's just really fucking boring and
It's
bland.
interesting that you say that because we've had a number of parents tell us that their children had detransitioned as a result of the lockdowns because they weren't
Yeah.
having that influence. So can you tell us when you started to have this sense that you were born in the wrong body and maybe detail all the things that you went through? Because you went through a lot.
Yeah. So I wouldn't I would say the whole born in the wrong body thing was a retroactive sort of look at
Mm.
my life. But the truth is, I didn't feel that way from a young age. What I did from a young age, though, is I had gender non-conforming behaviors. I wanted to be a ballerina, I wanted to be a chef, but also like my toy trucks. I also like diggers, but I wasn't interested in sports or football. I was obviously attracted to boys and not girls, and you know, all these things that make you feel a little bit alien amongst your peers made me feel extremely well, with a real like I had really bad self-esteem and didn't like my body and I felt very ugly and
Yeah.
all this sort of thing. So when I discovered gender dysphoria in my mid early 20s, I kind of looked back at everything and went, oh, so I felt this way from a young age, but and I think a lot of people do that where it's easier when you're remembering something to do so in a lens, rather than actual like being objective about the memory, for instance. So one thing I used to do was in school at about the age of, I don't know, 4 or 5, would get like some time to play dress up or whatever. And I would always dress up as a teacher and emulate the teacher. And again, that retroactive
Mm.
action was, oh, look, this is me trying to be a woman even at the age of 4 or 5, nothing to do with the fact that the school I was in had only female staff, right? It was,
You didn't
you
have
know what
any
I
other
mean?
role models.
No, no, no. I didn't. There might have been like a male caretaker or some shit, right?
I'm gonna
But
dress up and be the custodian.
yeah, but of course I'm gonna emulate the people who I'm like seeing most days in my life. And at 4 or 5, you don't really put much of a thought into what you do, and you just do what you want to do. Um, me my mother said like she kind of knew from an early age that I was gay and stuff like that because I was just different. I didn't like getting my hands dirty, and I was just very soft and very like not like not like girly on, but very like sort of I wasn't boyish. You know what I mean?
Do you happen to have sensory defensiveness?
I don't know what that is. Sorry, I've never
Okay.
heard that term.
No, that's okay. It's just the way you're talking made me think about it. Sensory defensiveness is when there's sort of this, like the tags in shirts bug you.
Mm,
Oftentimes, kids with it don't want to get dirty. They much
yeah,
rather play clean. If you put them on the grass in shorts, they're going to be like, "Oh, what's that grass feeling on me?" And
yeah,
I'm
I caught up on the
noticing,
label.
yeah, I'm noticing a lot of boys, especially who develop this, who later decide they're trans, have this sensory defensiveness, and it means they don't act like most of the other boys, because most boys don't have it. And
Yeah,
so their thought is, well, I must be a girl then, because I am
yeah,
acting so different from the boys.
exactly. Yeah. Um, so I like rough and tumble play kind of. I still did engage in that time to time, but that was like not always of my own volition. I didn't really like it. I didn't really like violence in me doing it sense. I didn't have that desire to feel powerful with my body, but I did want to feel powerful with my mind.
Hmm.
Which was a kind of, I don't know, it was a really strange thing. And from I had like a very like a mushroom haircut when I was a kid, like the step. And I was always getting confused as a girl. And by the time I got to about age of 10 or 11, my elder brother had started taking us for haircuts rather than my mother. Um, and he was just like, oh, just get it like a full buzz cut, because he kind of, I think he didn't like the fact that I was enjoying the fact that I was being not always seen as a boy and like that, because I was like, I pretended to be repulsed. I was like, I'm a boy, but thank you for thinking I was a girl, and all that sort of thing. So by the time I discovered gender dysphoria retroactively, it was just like all these things point towards me being in the wrong body. But it was nothing to do, like you said, the sensory issues, the low self-esteem, the depression, the anxiety, the same-sex attraction, you name it. But at the time, it's much, much easier to put it into that neat little ball and just pack it in one little
Well,
thing.
especially when you have a whole
Yeah.
community saying, go, go, go. Oh, this is it. This is going to solve all your
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah, and especially medical professionals doing that as well. Because I was like, okay, this is what people on the internet are saying. I think this is right too. I agree with them because this seems right, feels right. I'll go to the medical professionals and I'll ask them and I'll tell them everything, and they're like, yep, you're trans for real. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm trans.
So when you went in for your evaluation, did they look at any of those underlying issues? Did they
No.
ever ask, are you same-sex attracted? Do you have anxiety? Do you have a depression? Did they ask any of those questions? Because those seem like really important questions. But I did see a video that was released. I can't remember. It was a report, I think, that was done on Tavistock, and some of the employees at Tavistock were saying that they were worried that they were basically converting gay kids to trans.
Yeah,
And
that was pretty much what happens.
so you didn't feel like they ever looked into that at all. They just said, "Yep, you're trans. Let's put you on that conveyor belt towards full
In fact,
transition."
I would go so far to say as the opposite happened, where I would present my doubts to them and they would say that was cis sexism and transphobia and all that shit.
Oh,
So
internalized trans. See, I've been told that I've internalized, I'm an internalized transphobia, and that I'm actually really a man. I just haven't, because of that internalized transphobia, I'm like squishing down the transgender part of
well,
me. I don't know if you've ever heard that since you
yes, I
stopped
have.
having that
I've heard a
identity.
lot. So originally I had people who were like, oh, you detransitioned because you weren't getting support and you couldn't pass and all that shit. And I'm like, well, first of all, I had a lot of support. I maintained a full-time job, and I've had a full-time job for since I was 17, and I'm 35 now, right? And it's like I've got a strong work ethic. I'm absolutely okay in that regard.
So can you talk about, from the time you went into the gender clinic and all the different interventions that you had, and then what it was that sort of, dawned on you that this wasn't the right path?
So I had kind of given myself in the sense that I really wanted to tell them everything that I could. And there were things that I couldn't go into full detail because I wasn't ready to, like such as the stuff in the early days, the internet and stuff. But I did mention things like that. But I ended up having nearly 100 therapy sessions with one of the gender therapists at the gender clinic over 5 years. And what had actually happened in there is every time I'd sort of expressed my reason for doubt, whatever it was, whether it was getting surgery or what was worse, because I saw this in the notes back and I didn't realize how bad it was until I read the notes back. Where the months after surgery, when I'd started re-engaging with therapy again at the gender clinic, what had happened was I'd said, I feel like I'm regretting it. And they came back at me with, anesthesia can like put people in a depressive state and that, so give it some time. So I came back a few months later and I was like, I still feel really fucking depressed and really, I feel like I regret it. And they're like, no, as we've noted, anesthesia can actually lower your serotonin production. You have got really bad OCD. This is an OCD trait. You're ruminating. And I was just like, okay, well, fuck me, then I guess I'm not regretting it. But I kept bringing it up in therapy. I kept bringing it up and up and up to
Well,
the
and
point
the
where,
fact that they noted that you had OCD and ruminating was part of that, and they didn't identify that prior to the surgeries.
so what's worse is in 2013, prior to going into the gender clinic, I saw a psychologist who wasn't specialized in OCD, but had preliminarily diagnosed as with OCD. And he said I had pure O, which is like the purely obsessive side. I was like medicated on sertraline as well, like very, very high diagnosis of OCD. And at the time, I was ruminating whether or not something terrible had happened in early childhood, but I had no clear memory. And it was a rumination. It was an obsessive rumination, one that you can't obviously answer. And he refused to refer me on to the next level to explore that because he said if I did, it would just exacerbate the obsession and you would become more obsessed with that, which he was right to do because if I'm ruminating over something and I get therapy just for that rumination, I'm just going to feed the rumination. So it was like, I suggest actually instead, I don't know, like if he said that word verbatim, like if I suggest, but it was along the paths of like you need help with your OCD sort of thing. But at that moment, as I was finishing that, I was just like, oh no, I've discovered I'm trans, by the way. In one note, I was like, I'm 99% sure I'm trans. And then the next week it was 100%, to the point at which he noted in brackets, Richard now thinks it's 100% that he's
Wow.
trans. And I then went into the gender clinic, told them about like the internalized homophobia and all that sort of thing. And OCD was like not, they had known about that from the start, but they'd never once stopped opposed to thought that this sounds like this is an obsession,
Mhm.
right? Um,
Especially with the way it presented, with sort of being like, no,
I was
no
like an
thought about it,
ROGD.
90%, 100%. That's so.
Yeah. No, I came in, my first session was, I am 99% sure I'm trans.
Wow.
No mention of it before.
Right.
And I said, I remember this session, I was like, by the way, I've just found that all this, like a psycho saying it to him, like, all this is because giving him the crazy eyes,
Yeah.
all this is because I'm trans. I'm 99% sure I'm trans. And then he's like, keep in mind, we've just discussed pure awe, right? And obsessiveness, like the previous week. And then the next week I come back and I'm like, I'm 100% sure. And he's just
Right.
like, oh, okay, then. Um, so it wasn't a secret either. Like obviously the gender clinic had me notes. They had me referrals and stuff. And then when I was engaging in gender therapy in the gender clinic in 2015, when I first saw the psychiatrist there, I was like, because she was like, "Do you want surgery?" And I was like, "I'm not sure. Can I have some therapy?"
Mm.
And that was in the February 2015. And then by July 2015, she tried to refer us for surgery. It was very aggressive. It was very like, "You're here for this one purpose and this one purpose only."
Which is somewhat ironic, because one of the things that the whole trans ideology says is that, if you're a female, you can have a penis, and if you're male, you can have a vagina. And so, according to their own ideology, you really don't need the surgery.
no,
So it's interesting that they were pushing it.
it felt that way. The main,
Yeah.
like, it definitely felt as if it was like they were asking us, and then like so much they weren't even like stopping to pause for thought about like what I really, really wanted. And I felt like I had to say yes because I was getting the therapy, and I delayed it and delayed the surgery to the point where it took like 2.5 years to actually get it to the referral point because I'd
Well, it
cancelled
also
like
strikes me
referral.
that if you're there, I mean, I'm trying to put my mind like pretend like I'm at the gender clinic. And the thought
Mhm.
is, well, if this person's coming in because they're trans, well, the treatment for trans is this. And they don't have any other options. And so of course
Yeah,
they're going to push you towards surgery, because
yeah,
in their mind, that's the solution. So can
it
you talk
was.
a little bit about the surgery? Because you underwent
Oh,
a penectomy and a penile inversion, is that correct?
sorry.
Can
Yeah,
you are you comfortable talking in detail about that? Because you wrote some
I'll
things
talk.
on Twitter that really gave me information I hadn't had before.
Yeah. So just to recap to where I was, I got asked first of all if I wanted surgery in 2015. Um, at that point, I felt like I that was the direction I was going, but I had doubts. So I went through the initial referral process and put a pause to it at the end of 2015, said it was too soon. Same thing happened again the following year. And by 2017, they said to us, keep in mind, I've been in therapy all this time, and they said, you're established on hormones, you're passable and all this shit, like, because it was all judged on, and I was doing the voice stuff as well, because I can do the voice now, but I'm not going to do it. Um, and you could do I could do the voice exercises. So they were just like, if you don't want the surgery, then we'll just discharge you. And I was like thinking, shit, what about me therapy? So I was like, okay then. And I went to the therapist, and I was like, I'm still not sure and all this sort of thing, but I don't want to, I'm worried if I say no now, then in 5-10 years time I might not be able to do it, but I'm still not sure. And by the end of that session with the therapist, I ended up calling my psychiatrist to refer us on for surgery. Because I kind of got in my way. I kind of I got led there. I got talked into it. It was like, well, you may as well. You've got atrophy. You don't like your genitals, all this sort of thing. But I didn't. I never really cared. And like they were always saying, "Do you not like your genitals?" And I guess I don't know. But I never really thought about it. I never brought it up. It was always them bringing it up. And I was in a very obsessive state. I was abused in substances. And I told them all this. They knew everything I was doing. I was undertaking like really bad risks. I was meeting people for casual sex. I was doing like really stupid shit. I'm an adult and I can do these things. I understand that, but these weren't signs of somebody who was well established in good mental health and state, in my opinion. And what that eventually led to is I obviously got surgery in 2018, and when I was there, I really wanted to put a break on it, and I was waiting for an opportunity to get off the train, but it just felt like I couldn't. I didn't even see the surgeon before surgery, by the way, on the morning. I
Wow.
saw him. It was like it was so impersonal, and anyone who had surgery at that time will probably say the same thing, that like although some of the staff are absolutely lovely and great people, there are some people who just that they treat you as if you're lucky to be there, like you've inconvenienced them somehow personally. And
So you
The
better
reason,
not do anything to make their life any more hard. Like
yeah.
telling them you're not sure, because yeah.
Well, not just that, but it was a very weird environment. But anyway, I didn't kind of, again, I know people were like, well, you could have said no at any one point, but it was such a very chaotic time too, and I wasn't in a good mental state as well. Um, and basically, I went through with the surgery. It was supposed to last for 2.5 hours, but it lasted 5 hours. I had severe hemorrhaging. Um, I lost a lot of blood. It was like a class 3 hemorrhage. So it was like 1,600 milliliters of blood that they'd recorded, but I kept losing it after I came out. I ended up getting a blood transfusion a few days after, not immediately, it took days. I was in high fever, was in and out of consciousness. Um, I was just totally fucked. Um, Recovery took a very long time. I had a lot of problems with me urethra. So I went home with a catheter at first. It got took out and then I go back in, and then I had to get follow-up surgery to to fix me urethra because I couldn't pee, and that didn't work. So I had to go for general anesthetic again in 2019 for a revision surgery to see if they could fix it. And it did for a time, but what I've been told essentially is every 3 to 4 years I'm gonna have to have a urethral dilation. Because what's happening is it's just constricting, it's like a straw. And when it does that, it comes out very slow, it's painful. Um, and sometimes it just like you don't get much warning as well, and that's just the urethra problem. As for like the numbness and stuff, and the look, the look of it, I hate the fucking look of it. It looks like, most people are like, oh, it looks fine, but I don't like it at all. I didn't even think I've ever wanted a fucking vagina in the first place, if I'm actually honest. I don't like the look of vaginas. I don't want to do vaginas. And I found myself with a caricature of a vagina, not an actual vagina, a mockery of.
You're not an AAGP, you're not an autogynephile who finds it arousing to look like a woman. You're a young man who's attracted to penises, and so a vagina is not something you probably have a
No.
lot of experience with.
I mean, I've found myself in interactions with women when I've like it before transition and even during transition, but it was always like, I don't know, I wasn't like sexually into it. It was just more about the closeness with that person. And
Mm.
definitely pre-transition I felt like I had to, and I never once was able to like use me penis to penetrate. I just couldn't, I can never get it up for them because I wasn't sexually attracted to them at all. So it just ended up in a very like cuddly sort of thing, you know what I mean? And I'd, I'm not, I don't really have an attraction to women, but growing up, I tried to force myself to. That makes sense,
Mhm.
because I so badly didn't want to be gay. Like I tried me hardest to be attracted to women, to look at women, to fantasize about women. But every time I would do that, every time I would fantasize about women, it would just turn to one of my friends who I was crushing on instead in my fantasy. And then I would climax, and then I would feel horrible. I'd feel like
Oh,
really, really awful because I'd done that. But you just can't stop your desire, you just can't stop it. And that really, really drove me fucking insane. And it led us to not really wanting to use it, didn't have many relationships. But during transition, when I did have like male on male experiences with either other trans friends or whatever, like people my own age, I really, really loved it. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking to even go through surgery. Like I found it like, I was very, very into it physically. I was like, my body was switched on. Do you know what I mean? In a way that when I'd tried to sleep with women, it wasn't. it was just nothing there. But with like another male body, it was just like lightning through me soul in a way I did, and I was just alive with it and really wanted to
So,
be part of
so
it.
did the estrogen you were on, you mentioned some atrophy. Did that affect your sexual function? Just the
Yeah,
estrogen?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the main thing that affects sexual function is the anti-androgen rather than the estrogen.
Okay.
So the anti-androgen, which
So you were on a puberty blocker.
yeah, um,
Okay.
if
Even at your
well,
age, even
yeah,
after, oh wow, okay.
yeah. So you because our anyone in the 20s and 30s should be on in the treatment anti-androgens to stop the continued development and secretion of testosterone, because you get most of your development in your 20s and 30s.
Mhm.
So for instance, let's pick four people, 19-year-old, 29-year-old, 39-year-old, and a 49-year-old men, and you stand them together, and you can see there's a fucking huge difference between a 19-year-old and a 39-year-old, you know? Like physically, this testosterone changes you over time. And this is why that people in the 20s and early 30s tend to have a much better chance at blending in too. Because the body's still susceptible to certain hormones as well. Whereas when you're past that age marker, it's somewhere between late 30s and early 40s where males go through the menopause, and that's not a joke, like that's an actual thing, like andropause
Mhm.
it's called, where the testosterone levels decrease, and the the body's kind of been masculinized to the full extent. It's like 100% complete. There's nothing else to do.
Mhm.
So when they take estrogen, it's like, well, there's nothing to like feminize. Your skin might change a bit, but nothing's going to change. Not in the way somebody in the 20s and 30s might change with like the body shape or the facial shape or the fat redistribution. And then the younger you get, the more impactful that changes, the less testosterone you have. Which is why the younger you are, the more feminine you look, obviously. Um,
And what you're saying now is the argument that's being used to medicalize children. Do you want to just address that?
yeah. Well, you're basically trying to say that you know those children before they know themselves. And that's quite a sheer damn thing to do to a kid on a hunch, where if you look at my story and a lot of other male detransitioner story, we were all just gay kids, right? Or we were gender non-conforming kids or whatever. And we we all medicalized ourselves, and to do that as a kid would be it's crippling. um and also, let's also unpack this idea of it's better to do it while they're young because they're more passable. So that is an admission that this is all about reinforcing gender
Mhm.
stereotypes,
Very much
right?
so. It's very regressive.
Yeah,
One of the things as a woman that bothers me is that it suggests that, passing is being an attractive woman. And so
yeah.
the idea is, there are many women who are not conventionally attractive. So are they less than women? And a lot of times we see adult trans identified males really putting women down and saying, well, I'm more beautiful than you are. So
Yeah.
it's really about this regressive stereotype and acceptance of beauty, and the idea of passing being based on those what are generally harmful stereotypes.
And also it kicks gender non-conformity into the
Mhm.
face, doesn't it?
Mhm.
It's like, well, actually what you should hope to achieve is conventional beauty in
Yeah, either
one
be
of the sex.
male or yeah, either look conventionally one way or the other. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good
Don't
point.
be, yeah, don't be a man in a dress. Don't be a man who wants to be effeminate but still read as a man, right? Don't be a woman who wants to be a butch, or don't be a tomboy,
Mhm.
right? Don't be a tom girl, whatever. And it's like that these are the messages what we're saying. And I think that's catastrophic.
Well, and just based on your experience, so you took a testosterone suppressor as an adult after having already gone through puberty. Can you describe what that did to you?
Yeah, so I'd started taking that at the age of 26. I'd started puberty at about 15, 16. So it was very delayed puberty for me. So by the time I'd started the anti-androgen, I had completed it, but I was delayed anyway, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
So I hadn't had that long of testosterone. And that's why I was so rushing to really, really try and get the blocker in ASAP. Um, because I couldn't bear the thought of getting any more masculine, and I know I'd went through puberty. I know me I couldn't change like me body or anything, but I could change anything else coming in. So that was my priority. Stop testosterone. Don't give a shit about estrogen. Stop testosterone. Testosterone is poison, is what I felt. And it's what I read online. Testosterone is actual poison. We joked and memed about it, about how this natural hormone that's in your body is poison. It's like, it's ludicrous. It's absolutely insane. Um, and when I started that, originally I had a surge of testosterone because your body's reaction to that is to overproduce elsewhere, and that led me to be extremely confident. And then over time, that surge ended, and I felt like I was getting somewhere, but I also felt myself getting extremely frustrated very easily. No, and I don't know why that was. I had no testosterone and I had no estrogen. I had nothing in my body, and but I was finding myself getting more and more agitated. And then eventually, when I started the estrogen, I was like, oh God, I feel that sort of relaxed state that we were talking about before, of how the when you take an estrogen, it increases like your serotonin production. So I was naturally like more relaxed from that. But over time, and I feel like it is. So spiralactin, Zoloft, Goserelin, and Lupron, all the major anti-androgens and puberty blockers. I know this may seem anecdotal, but I've seen so many trans people who have had psychotic episodes while being on anti-androgens. And the years between 2014 and 2017, leading up to surgery, ironically, I was me most obsessive, I was me most delusional, and I was me most psychotic. I wasn't violent or anything like that, but psychotic in the sense that I believed and wanted to, and I was just taking extraordinary risks with myself, and I had no regard for my future. It was it was crazy, and that's why I classify it as like a moment of psychosis. I wasn't myself, and it led us just to hate myself and want to kill myself and all this sort of thing. And then eventually what would happen physically is I had like your skin would smoothen out and stuff like that, and some fat redistribution, but not much. Like me torso kind of pinches in just a little bit, but it's not like a real hourglass. It's like a
Mhm.
shit squashed hourglass. um I've always kind of had like hips anyway, and like wider hips, but I noticed like a little bit of redistribution there. But the biggest thing I noticed was your orgasms just kind of die. Like if you're able to get an erection, you can't maintain it. And if you are able to achieve orgasm, it's like you get to that build up, and then it's just like poof, it's nothing. There's no climax. There's no reward at the end. It just build, nothing. And it's like anticlimactic, ironically.
Very much so. Well, and it's interesting because if you have someone who's experiencing anticlimaxes on a regular basis because of the medications they're on, it would be easier, I would think, for them to consent to having their genitals operated on, because it's like, yeah, they're not working
Well,
that
they're
well
not getting
anyway.
used anyway.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I said. I was
Yeah.
like, it's just gonna get worse. And if it, and the doctor said that if I continue on this, then You could have testicular atrophy in a decade, which might mean you might need an orchidectomy anyway,
Mm.
and all this sort of thing. Like long term, like it was like getting shriveled and stuff like that. And because I couldn't have much sexual function, I wasn't that sexually interested, which got linked to more like unease with my body, which they were like, they really like put this narrative that I wasn't putting forward to them on me. And
Well, and then the medications you were on reinforced that narrative.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and the problem was they knew about the really bad OCD throat, right? And after surgery, when I'd went through this horrible procedure, and I was wounded like physically, like I'd ripped sutras and all sorts of things, which are like the stitches that keep you together and stuff. I was having infections, UTIs, but I was just thinking to myself, it'll get better, it'll get better, it'll get better, but never did get better. And when I started talking about the regret and stuff, they were like, well, this is just a rumination because of the anesthetic lowering your serotonin. And I just couldn't seem to win. And then eventually, about a year after surgery, they said, clearly your OCD is a problem, so we're going to refer you for OCD treatment.
Wow.
And then I got
Ah,
discharged. And then I got discharged from the gender clinic
wow.
and referred for OCD treatment
Wow.
after all that.
And so was it the OCD treatment that helped you to realize you made a mistake?
I haven't started it.
You haven't started it.
No.
So what was it that was it being released from the gender clinic? What was it that sort of that just sort of you realized, wow, this
I
is
knew I realized that I regretted it because I was experiencing regret quite early on, but I didn't realize that because I blamed myself completely up until the end of last year. It was like, I'm 100% responsible for this.
yeah.
And then when the detransition stuff started and people were like talking about their medical notes and stuff, I thought, oh, I've got a drawer full of papers. Because what I did is every letter I got copied into, I would just shove it in this drawer. And I had this huge, horrible drawer, unorganized, with like countless amounts of like papers, bank statements, letters. And my friend helped sort through it with us because I'm like really bad at that sort of thing. And I started reading through my letters and I was just fucking devastated from the ones that I had, not even the ones, the records that the gender clinic had about me that I didn't know. And then I started realizing, putting the pieces together, that actually I told them fucking everything and I'm no better off from when I started.
Mm.
How the fuck did I end up where I am now? And then I just kind of started backtracking in my mind and I just kind of thought, I don't think this is all my fault. And I was willing to change that 100% and 95%. And then looking at the 5%, and that 5% has grew since. I still do feel, there is, I've got the part to play in the fact that put my trust in them, and I put my trust and faith into this system too. But I was also deeply unwell and I'm deeply had a lot of red flags and shit, and they just didn't pick it up. And it took, after surgery in 2018, it took about 3 years to realize that I'd really, like, this wasn't right. I'd kind of really, really, really fucked up. And I'd kind of been betrayed a bit. It took a long time after surgery to do that. It's not something you just wake up one day and be like, oh, this was a mistake. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of self-blame, there's a lot of grief. You've got your regrets managed by medical professionals, as I was telling you. And you dare not say that to anyone that you're not sure if this was the right thing, because what are they going to do for you? They can't wind back time. It's like a powerless thing to say, so you're very much on your own. And I'd hoped for a while that time would fix it. But like things like, although healing did take place and stuff, it didn't change how I felt about it. And then when I felt like detransition was the way forward for me. I was like, I'm not living like this for the rest of my life. And I definitely thought, I didn't even think of like even taking any sort of action because of when it happened and stuff like that until I entered the detrans sphere, and I was just like, you know what, fuck them, I'm gonna try. And I was just like, you know, I'm gonna give it a shot. And it's not about like money or anything like that. It's about taking a shot. Like, because the feeling vulnerable, the feel like nothing can they rely on, like, people to blame themselves and fade away. And I'm like, you know what, fuck you. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try. And if it fails, it fails. I hope it doesn't, but if it
Oh, you're
fails,
talking about a lawsuit that you're engaged in.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because I am engaged in suing the health services
And
for
one
this.
thing that I think it's so, and I want to shout this from the rooftops, that you were let down by medical professionals. If you have mental health issues and you go in and you're given the wrong treatment, that is not your fault. And I hear detransitioner after detransitioner who say one of the reasons it took a while for them to detransition is because they had this sense of guilt
Yeah,
and betrayal, and they thought it was their fault. And these, people have to realize that when you have a mental illness, you go to a mental health professional for help. They are
yeah,
supposed to guide you towards health and well-being. And in this case, you were put on a path towards the opposite. You were damaged permanently for life, Richie.
yeah.
You will never get back what they took from you, and that is not your fault. And it never was.
I appreciate that, Erin. I just hope people like looking in can understand, for even like trans people in it who are like totally like, oh, this is the best thing that ever happened to us. And I'm just like, yeah, you shout that a lot and you say that a lot, but I kind of feel like,
Hmm.
if you were really, really settled and living your best life, you wouldn't be on Twitter telling people that. You would just be doing it, right? But I do feel like there is there's there is a lot of self-regulation, to speak the truth, about these things, about the realities, about the how good is it really? Like, is it as rosy as you're selling? Because if it's not, then you have to acknowledge it yourself. And then other people looking in have to be like, okay, well, that also applies to me. So it's very much in their interest to protect themselves, um, by not having these discussions, because by having these discussions, you're opening up yourself up to a huge vulnerability. Like, could you imagine entertaining the thought that this probably might have caused more harm than good? Like, could you imagine how well it would do to you when you've pinned everything saying it was, and you've, because I've noticed this with some trans people, they'll say, life's been better since, and da 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 da. Yeah, I've got no sensation. Yeah, I can't climax and that, but my life has been better since. I don't have like genital dysphoria anymore. And I was like, was it genital dysphoria or was it severe sexual trauma? And you've just
Right,
cut off, you
right.
know, you know what I mean? And it's like, imagine you had really bad trauma with something to do with a different limb, and then you cut it off and you're like, oh, don't have that
Oh,
trauma
I don't
anymore.
have that problem anymore. Yeah, and that's what I hear from a lot of, and especially, I experienced sexual trauma and had so much hatred towards my privates, and thankfully, nobody was there telling me that it's because I was born in the wrong body, and we just need to create a fake penis. But I
Yeah.
think that in some ways, for boys, it's even that kind of sexual trauma can be even more confusing because if a girl's sexually traumatized, she might experience some arousal with that trauma. But if a boy does, he might get an erection during that sexual trauma, and that can be incredibly confusing for a boy when they feel like they're being violated, but at the
Mm.
same time they're having that sexual response. And I think when I talk to a lot of the boys who took on a trans identity, it seems like a lot of it was because of that confusion over their physiological response that they had no control over during the trauma.
Yeah. Um, I've got nothing else to add other than, yeah. That's not a like, I'm not great at talking about that topic because that's not something that I could clearly contribute to with something, anything clear. And I still think like I am in the processes of dealing, like processing that myself,
Mhm.
in a way. So
Well, let's move
uh
on to a topic you're more comfortable with, and
yeah,
that's I am seeing you on Twitter doing a lot of advocacy and outreach, and it
yeah,
seems like you're really trying to get the message out to kids. You know, if someone had been there when you were younger and said, Richie, slow it down. Let's talk about this. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's get you the appropriate health care. You would be a very different person today. You'd be in a very different
yeah.
place. What would you want to say to, you know, little Richie if you had the chance?
I don't, but oh God, hindsight is 2020,
Mhm.
isn't it?
Well,
You know?
maybe if there's a child in a similar
But like,
situation.
so for me, I'm not like targeting only work on like children specifically or anything like that. My work, everything I do is targeting trans,
Mhm.
all trans, everything to do with it. But for those who are caught in, and I regularly talk to people who come to me or they've been directed my way, I never ever message or hunt anyone out. Like, you know what I mean? Because that would be weird to me. But if they come in my DMs and they say, I want to ask you a question, or they just want to talk about things, I'll talk about it with them. And I've had plenty of people who have been like, um, saying thank you that their son or daughter is like no longer going through surgery because they've started looking into it and they realized it's not all cut and dry. And it's not like I've horrified people of surgery. What I've done is I've shook people into looking into it because everyone blindly trusts each other. And what I'm trying to do with my messages, if I am trying to do anything, is look over there. I'm not going to tell you the answer, but look over there and find it yourself. And you tell me what you think of what I'm pointing at. And that's what I try to do. Sometimes you have to spell it out for people, and sometimes you need to write about it in a way that people can understand. But what I try to do is I try and get people to look at things. So a lot of my tweets, like, and I've seen this comment come up a few times, especially by like, say, a feminist who's been in this for a long time. And they were like, yeah, of course, we all knew that. And I was like, yeah, I know this. You know this.
But there
But
are a
do
lot of
people
people out there who don't know this.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And it's like, if I've got eyes on my account from the outside, isn't this the best time to talk about this and talk about it from the lens of coming out of the community? Which is why, like, I hear a lot of people saying you shouldn't do any detrans advocacy until like you're a year into detransition or 2 years into detransition. And I'm like, that might be, I agree from a mental health standpoint, but when you get past those 1, 2 years, you're gone. You don't need this anymore. You're away. So why would you do that advocacy?
Right.
I feel like it's very important to
Well, and
catalog.
I feel like we're at a tipping point now where
Yeah.
stories like yours can make a difference. I have a friend right now who's got a son who's, I believe he's mid 20s, who's planning on having the kind of surgery you had.
Mhm.
And she's sent him some information that you've put on Twitter, hoping that it will make a difference, because we don't hear about stories like yours. We hear, about, I think a lot of times the stories we hear are stories of people who haven't been through it, who say this is all wonderful and grand, and they haven't been through it. So we need to hear from people like you who actually had the surgery, who know how incredibly invasive it is. People die from this surgery. It's so
Yeah.
invasive.
I nearly
um,
died.
yeah. So what is sort of a parting message that you would give, if to anybody who sort of maybe is on the fence on this, and thinking that they'd like to get the surgery, but they're not sure now after
I
hearing your
think
story?
if you're not sure, the worst thing you're going to do by delaying it is give yourself more time to think. But once you go through it, you've gone through it. There is no second chances. There is no irreversible like way of reversing this. You could try your best and get a phalloplasty, but that fucking thing is a
Yeah.
horrific nightmare,
Mhm.
right? This is irreversible. If you don't do it now, you can still have that option in 5 years or 10 years or even in a year. It doesn't have to be next month. It doesn't need to be in 6 months. it's not going to make you any younger. It's not going to change your body. There's this belief too that people who have had orchidectomies and people who have had vaginal plasties don't, like, their body changes even more than the hormones provide, and that's a load of fucking bullshit. Your body will not change anymore with or without surgery
Oh,
as well.
interesting. So
Um,
it almost sounds to me too like get off the testosterone blocker for a while, get all your mental health issues addressed,
yeah,
because that again, it seems like they say, no, those mental health issues aren't important. Here, let's put you on a testosterone blocker that's going to completely alter your physiology and nudge you into the direction of believing that surgery is appropriate because you're going to lose your sexual function.
yeah. And no matter how old you are, you will lose it.
Wow. See, and that's very new to me. I've talked to a lot of people and I know a lot about these medications, but I didn't realize that they were putting adults on essentially puberty blockers and that the
Depends how old you are,
atrophy,
though.
pardon?
Depends how old you are.
Yeah,
If you are over a certain age, they won't put you on the anti-androgens because there's no point doing it.
right. But if you're
So
still in your 20s, and
yeah, or
that's where a lot of these kids are. You know, they're
yeah,
they're between, 10 years old and 30. That's sort of the demographic we're looking at.
yeah.
And the 10-year-old, I can't even imagine what a doctor's doing, putting, retarding a child's growth and development at 10 years old is,
That's exactly what it does.
it's uh inconceivable to me, really. But even someone who's 18, 19, 20, even up to 30, I have some children, and it's very clear to me that there's still a lot of development that goes on after 18.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing that's wild and a lot of people point out is, like, you can't drink in the US till you're 21.
Mhm.
You can't, like, vote until, what was it, like 18 in the US. You can't, like, join the military, but you can, like, sign away
Yeah.
your body
You can't
parts
you
when you
can't rent a car, you know.
it's insane. It's absolutely
It
insane.
is. It really is.
You can't do those things, but you can do this thing.
You
Um,
can basically destroy your sexual function for life.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, you can, and you can do so with the authority of medical professionals at your backing.
Right. And that's part of it that I see as the betrayal that like you mentioned, that either kids are going to feel like it was their fault, but if they get to the point where they realize it wasn't their fault, the extreme betrayal they're going to feel when they realize that the adults who were supposed to be there to protect and guide them ended up leading them towards such
This
incredible
is a
harm.
critical point. This is a critical point because imagine the machine that is gender affirmation. It relies on what narrative? That if you don't do this, they'll die, they'll kill themselves.
Mhm.
So when one person does die and kill themselves, it fuels that narrative further. So when you get a detransitioner who regrets their surgery, or you get somebody who just regrets the surgery, whatever, and they take their own life, it's it's just a win-win for them because they know the shame, they're not going to speak out, and they know what's going to end up happening is their death is going to be politicized and further fuel the gender affirmation machine. So they know that this is going to increase suicidality, but they also know when that suicidality occurs, nobody will ask them a question. They'll just say, we need more of this. So it just feeds it. It's like a machine getting churned again and again, which is why I was like, when I stopped and took a step back and thought, I'm not going to die and become a martyr for this bullshit. This is a load of shit. It needs to be exposed properly from the inside out because looking in can only do so much. But inside out, like, everyone's right what they say mostly, you know. It's not like 100% dead on. There are a few, like, wild theories that are a bit like, I don't quite agree with. But I feel like one of the biggest indicators in terms of the takeaway, I am rounding up, don't worry.
No, because
The,
I was actually going to ask you one other thing about your lawsuit, because I wanted to say that regardless of whether you win or lose, lawsuits like yours are going to make an impact because it will get the information out there that there are people like you who regret it, who it wasn't the right choice. And I always say, you know, when I talk to people, I say, according to the trans ideology, I was a trans kid. I was insistent, persistent, and consistent. And
Yeah.
I am no longer considering myself trans. That means I'm one case where that didn't work. If there's one case where it didn't work, there are other cases.
Yeah.
And we need to have those examples to show, you know, because they're saying, you know, if kid says they're trans, they're trans. And we
Yeah.
need every example we can find to show that that's not true. So sorry to interrupt.
No, no, not at all. I think that's a very important point. Even yet, like, and I know trans people hear this, especially like, well, you never transitioned, so what the hell are you talking about? There's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with anyone saying, you know, if I was minus 20 years younger than I am now, this would have been me.
Mhm.
Imagine me 20 years ago.
Right.
It,
If you had been at the same elementary school I had been, you would have been put in therapy with the school counselor.
yeah,
You would have
straight
been
away.
put in a support group because they put a, you know, a bunch of kids together who were having issues, and we,
Yeah.
you know, worked them through. And at no point would anybody have said, you're right, you're born in the wrong body. Here's the appropriate solution. And it makes me angry that, you know, people call me cisgender, because I'm like, well, no.
There is no cis and transgender.
No, I'm not, you know.
Why it's why I say I'm not male to female to male, I'm male. I never went to female and I never went back to male. I was always
Always
male.
male, no
There
matter
is
how you
no,
look. Right. I mean, I wear hiking boots everywhere.
yeah,
You know, people often, you know, make fun of me because I don't, I'm not very gender conforming. I have long hair because I sunburn very easily, and I will get a horrible sunburn if it's short. So that's
same,
why I have long hair. It's not because I'm trying to adhere to, you know, stereotypes of what it means to be female. So I think
same.
that, you know, your lawsuit is so important. And can you just tell us where you are with that?
We're in the early stages. Can't give too much away, but I'm hoping that I can provide a succinct update in the coming months. But I've got to keep everything very close to my
Right.
chest.
Well, I think I can speak for many, many people when I say thank you, because I've been involved in litigation and it's not easy.
No.
And you're going through, I mean, you went through this very difficult process, and then you're sort of grappling with what happened, and now you're fighting against what happened. And that's a lot. So take care of yourself, but also thank you.
No, thank you.